Hey all. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, this works. Okay, great. This augmentation is, I'm going to try and forget that it's there. Okay, so I'm Alex. I'm a designer. I'm a researcher. I'm really glad to see you today. And in the next 20 minutes, I'll be talking to you about designing inclusive research studies, about my own facilitation frustrations as a researcher, and about innovation. And I'll end on innovation and hopefully into sort of a hopeful note. There is a content warning for you. We will touch on disability, on exclusion, on parenthood, and quite sensitive topics. In terms of accessibility, I aim for AAA contrast. I aim to have minimal text on my slides and try and describe the image. So if I'm over-describing to you, that's why. There is a general notice. I'm like dying to try and make it better. Sorry, it clicked too much. So I'm really open and grateful for any feedback after this presentation, okay? So like, don't take this as me talking at you. I'm hopefully designing with you. Since 2009, I've been called names, many names. I'm a service designer, I'm a researcher, I was a UX design director, I was a head of experience design for over 8 years for different companies in London. I'm a leader, I'm now a founder of my own agency for the past 2 years. I had the privilege of working with a lot of really wonderful clients, and a lot of them won't fit on this slide. And I have led really great design teams and shared in a lot of places. I now run Cosmic. We create successful digital product systems and teams for people who care about design. So a lot of our clients, from startups to big corporates, what unites them is that they care about design. And research is, for us, at the center of that design. So when someone recently asked me a question, it's like, but you do research? We're like, yes, we do. This is where we start very, very often, and we do it really seriously. The stories that I'll be sharing, and I thought about this really long and hard on what exactly to talk to you about. They will come from these two places. So there are two studies that we've done. One study is for the geeks of you. It's a mixed method. Survey and interviews, 49 people. Those were serial research participants, so people who participated in research for like a long time, and they were invited over and over. All of them shared the fact that they identify as having a disability of a specific kind. They were a mix of socioeconomical backgrounds, and they had different jobs. In terms of second source of today's talk is very much about learning habits and accessibility of e-learning systems for students. When we talk about students here, I want you to imagine I've led that project. We've interviewed kids from 5 to 11 years together with their parents in the UK mainstream education system. So those are the two sources. I want you to kind of keep that at the back of your head as we go through it. But before we jump in, I want to have a show of hands if you had anything in your life that like started too early. So you expected a meeting at a certain time, and it started too early, and it kind of threw you off course. Has it ever happened to you? Yes, it has, hasn't it? Okay, something that's been going on for too long, and you kind of lost focus. Hopefully not this talk. I really hope so. I don't want to know if that's the case. Something that started too late, and like you're like, okay, I was expecting it there, that threw off all my plans. Yes. Time. Time, we found, is one of those really key 3 aspects of any research study that can go really, really wrong and can be really badly designed. And you need to think about research studies as something you can design. If you think about that, there are a couple of aspects. So time, you can time box certain things, you can ask certain questions, then switch to something else. You have time, you have space. Space is a physical space. It has to be accessible, as Marianthi said. It has to be also emotional space so that people feel safe to share with you things. And then you have heroes, and you have a choice who to invite, and you have a choice who to include and exclude. And by including certain people, you will exclude others, inevitably, and you have to be conscious about that choice. I want to start my talk from a problem. How a badly designed research study makes your participants feel. I was beginning to doubt myself. I was self-conscious. I felt stupid. I felt like I'm not adding value. I stopped engaging in research. This is a part of our first study. This is what people said. They had bad research experiences, and that's what it made them feel. So we have a lot of work to do. So let's talk about designing your research studies better. This is very much a collection of things that we learned, very specific things. So as I said, we went a bit meta. We did a study of research studies. with people. And this is a methodology in samples. So we did a survey, semi-structured interviews, 13 people with visual and hearing impairment. You'll notice I'm using a medical model of disability in here specifically. It was used for recruitment. 12 people with motor adjustment needs, 12 people with hidden cognitive needs, and 11 people with access needs. We specifically mean mobility, which means they need specific adjustments getting into the space. All of them with previous research experience. We've also interviewed moderators, specifically within those categories. We were looking for three things. We were looking for common pain points, so all these groups, like, do they share certain pain points? Common value adds. So Marianne, you talked about, like, what is in it for participants, like how did it change for them, what did they learn, so follow up. So that part, we were looking for what people really loved. And then can some of those things we found in the first two categories be more meaningful to some groups but not others? And we found time, right? And this is what I opened with. So the scheduled, and I'll talk to you with the words of the participants, A, because I've been enabled, and B, because you really need to hear this. You need to hear it firsthand of what people actually said. So hopefully we'll bring them closer to you. The scheduled meeting lasted an hour and a half rather than an hour. I found it difficult to provide effective focus after that length of time. The biggest effect on that time specifically, and the comments came a lot from participants with cognitive or hidden disabilities. We're talking about ADHD, we're talking about dyslexia, we're talking specifically about those things. Tech, so if my access technology is not working properly, then it means that I am unable to carry out the research. I find this very frustrating, and it makes me feel anxious and stressed. Can you feel how charged this is? This is really, really emotional. And that was specifically for people with vision and hearing impairments. So that was specific to that category, very, very much something we've noticed. Environment, I was told somewhere would be accessible, but when I got there, there was a step. They answered, it's only a little one, which wasn't helpful in a power chair. Then I heard them saying that the person is complaining about a step as though I was a problem. If that doesn't make you angry, I don't know what will. Like, we have so much work to do, and this is someone who participated in research. Moderator connection and skill is very interesting one. So this one, I felt rushed, and the researcher kept shouting at me to hurry up and answer her questions. She also snapped her fingers at me. I felt like she was singling me out because she didn't like my answers. It was obvious she had a personal connection with the product, so was annoyed when I said I didn't like something. It was humiliating. Again, a lot of the terminologies there, this was very, very important for us to highlight. It was mentioned by people with motor adjustment needs. I need to specify what I mean when I say this. This is adjusting to use the laptop, to use the machines specifically. And more research needs to be done into why that was so prominent in that group, in my opinion. But it was mentioned across the groups as sometimes a connection with moderators. Someone couldn't understand their language, or couldn't understand the accent, or couldn't understand the questions, and so on. So that, just brings up the importance of moderator. And the last part, value exchange. So this is a positive one. The facilitators were so well informed, inspiring, and motivational. They were obviously taking notice of the responses of each participant and took into account their individual needs. So we're talking about groups in here, or rather, a participant is talking about group, which we found really interesting, and we've compared it to pre-COVID and after COVID, and when everything became a bit more, people are expecting a service and a value exchange from that interaction, to ensuring they learn something. So it's not you extracting value by understanding the insight and getting the insight. It's about people learning from that experience. So we're talking about time, right? What's important in the research study design? Time, tech, environment, moderator skills. I don't want to say skills, it's just moderator connection even. Connection of a person to a person, if we're talking about specifically the interviews or similar or groups, and value exchange, so designing for that. Very, very important. So we didn't find a better way to take all of our learnings and create a game, which we run at quite a few events and companies, and it's all about designing your research study and then dealing with the unexpected things that come up, which evil moderators throw at you. In that case, we play the evil moderators, but that's basically something that we believe in. We do learn via play, so we try and ensure that we all learn through this experience. So we talked about, how am I doing for time? Am I good? Yes, the timekeepers. So we talked about study design. And then there is facilitating in a conscious and open way. So it's a very personal question for me. I'm a facilitator. And lately I've been busy doing this. So it's very much that research with children that I talked to you about. It is about learning habits and accessibility of e-learning systems for neurodiverse students and students with disabilities. And I will not talk to you about the outcome of that study as it's a private client. However, what really, really brings me a lot of joy is that it resulted in a lot of change in learning materials for schools in the UK. And that's why I do what I do. There were a couple of frustrations that I want to talk to you about specifically to that study, but also my wider work as a moderator. And one of them was really, really evident, like 3 of them were evident, so I will talk through these 3. Making the space work is really important. Raise your hands if you are a researcher and you've been to those labs which are created like a control center. There is like a one-way mirror, all these things. Have you ever facilitated research in the labs? Thank God the days of this are gone, right? Because you're doing 2 things. You, A, putting people in an environment that is unfamiliar to them. And B, you're making them use the technology and the machines that are yours very often. And that is something that we, know not to do, so we definitely recommend to keep the space flexible by having a very good tech setup. We use Zoom. For live captioning, it's an easy way to record iOS via AirPlay. Good recording can be used for both in person, actually, and remote. OBS, which is open broadcasting software. Sorry, this is getting very technical, but hopefully you'll get some tips from this. So for when you want a more complicated setup with a few cameras, that's that. HDMI capture or lightning cable for participants to use their own devices. Always, and children want to use their own devices because they're unfamiliar with something that you're about to kind of give them. So that was one, take your mobile lab with you, create it wherever it is, unless you can do contextual inquiry and actually go to their homes, which is the best way to research. Meet people in the place where they are, to your point. Second frustration, or rather challenging point I had is the high degree of unpredictability in turnout and discussion. So throughout my career and in this research, people turn up with more people because they feel like those people will bring value. And all of your preparation, discussion guides, whatever you've done just kind of flies out of the window. And what we learned is you do have to focus on core things you must learn. Before I've amended this slide, it had a double negative. It said, think about 3 things you cannot not learn. This is kind of my approach and philosophy to it. So sure you prepare, sure you do the discussion guides, but that's more for you to structure the thinking. And for the rest, it's very much about having a couple of things in focus and allowing this to flow. We've got immense value from parents and children kind of just being themselves and also bringing sometimes up to 3 to 4 children together with them when we just expected a parent and a child. And it's one of the most difficult research studies I've moderated so far. And the third one is a very emotional one for me. And I don't know about you, I'm in this job because I want to make things better. But also, throughout my career, and in that particular one, maybe I can tell that story to you. I don't know if you have ever sat in front of a mother who is making a choice between medicating the child and suppressing their development in early years, or investing in a seizure device that will monitor the seizures and hoping that this will go away. So that is, a lot of topics we touch on are highly emotional. They're difficult, and I've come to learn that it's very, very important for us as moderators to find an offloading technique. As a mental health first aider, I know how important that is. You can use paper, you can use a recording, you can use a person. Please don't use an unsuspecting friend, which is like, how are you doing? Well, let me tell you about all these things that happened to me. Don't do that, please. If that is a person, ensure they're comfortable with you talking to them. But it's very, very important, and a lot of people who do work in the space of kind of mental health and help will know that it's an important technique for you not to carry all these things with you. Create your own safe space for yourself. So to sum it up, tips for moderators: design your text setup, keep the focus on the core of your study, 3 things. Find an offloading technique, it's important for your mental health and well-being. Now I want to finish on a very hopeful thing about, our whole day today is about moving, from inclusion to innovation, right? And how we innovate with inclusion. No surprise to anyone, people have differences. We have cultural differences, we have biological differences, we have social economic. I'm still working on that slide. I haven't found, there's so many models, so many that you can, and so many differences that we can list. And historically, accessibility kind of dabbled in there, mostly, a little bit in here, and a little bit in the language and kind of culture and tiny bit. But there are a lot of things that we still need to take into account when we're designing for inclusion. And there is no perfect model to do that. It's things that we need to be aware of. And to this, I want to tell a story from that last research. One of the participants I was speaking with, imagine a girl, she's very young, has the dyslexia, quite pronounced dyslexia, and she was talking about her inventions to us, and she was saying, I use a paper scope to focus on 1 letter at a time, so that the letters on the board in school stop jumping, and she talked about tons of micro-inventions that them as kids, they invent and they do, and they use, and I was thinking, this is it? Finally, finally, companies are waking up to the fact of needing to research and needing to design for this scenario. And finally, we kind of got that, this is where I want to live in. I want to live in that world where we design within context, with evidence, for people and with people. And luckily, a lot of people and a lot of companies are now paying for that work. And we do work a lot with private sector. It is more and more coming into focus, and very happy about it. Because let's face it, the World Wide Web historically sucks at embracing differences. And this was my search 2 days ago. And I've searched for personalities, and that's a gender-neutral term. Now, this is the result, one of the first 3. So I invite you to think about that. You can argue there are some metrics of diversity in there. There are some others that are lacking. So my message to you is whatever you start doing today will make things better, fairer. It's more inclusive, in every way better. So the only way to build an inclusive future is to keep practicing it. And thank you.
Hello, hello, hello. Yes, I'm all live. Okay, we've got time for 1 or 2 quick questions before we dive into our break, and I know you guys are hungry, so we will make that quick. So we're going to take your question, but we're going to go here first.
Yes. Sorry, I was trying to get to questions.
Thanks, Alex. Great presentation. So my question was around the offloading techniques. You mentioned reading, recording yourself,
yes.
Speaking to someone. I was wondering if having passions like going for a run, doing sports, or any other type of passion that could help to offload your burden, let's say.
I think it really depends on thank you so much for the question. I think that's really relevant, and I think that might help. It really depends on how you deal historically with these kind of things. To some people it might be helpful. To some others it might be helpful to kind of let it out and talk about it. And due to the fact that researchers historically are quite bound by NDAs and things like that, I don't think we talk a lot about our work. And when the work becomes emotionally charged, it's one of those things where I was thinking a lot about that space, and I do think physical activity helps, but also I do think sometimes we try to numb it down by physical activity, and actually numbing is not what is needed in here. It's kind of just that transition from your cognition, from your side, so that the weight kind of shifts to, okay, I've dealt with this now. So yes and no, depends on what will work for you. Yeah, Cool. Thank you for the question.
Hi, quick question. So I think both of you yourself and Melanie mentioned about Zoom and remote as one of the methods to conduct research with accessibility need users. My question specifically relates to blind users. So how did you main conduct in remote possible research with blind people, or if so, if you can explain how, because I only know the face-to-face approach to it.
Yes. So I have personally, but they were not. So there are two answers to this. So one, I have conducted research with blind participants. There are two kind of approaches to it. One is that sometimes we ask whether a person would be more comfortable in someone's presence or someone who's helping. And in that case, you kind of create the research session in order for two people to participate, not one. So that second person drives the interface, but also just voice controlled in voice. We facilitated research with, again, blindness. There is a scale. There is a really, really large scale, and I think what people very often imagine is yes or no with a lot of disabilities, like blind or not blind. I facilitated people with extreme vision loss and with children as well, both in person and online. And I can say that that is possible as long as the object of your research is not like super elaborate prototype in Figma. Because that's not, it really depends on the subject. Does that answer your, I'm trying to, come and find me, we can talk about it for like more extensive and I can talk to you about specifics. But yeah, I think this is, I don't think, I know this is absolutely possible and should be conducted.
Thank you very much for your questions. And to Alex, put your hands together. Thank you.